3-0. Do you know what this means? Respect. Otamendi, Kevin De Bruyne, Fernandinho, Silva, Sterling, Agüero. This is football heritage.
The special one and Manchester United. It's a match that, quite frankly, was set on a collision course since that fateful day on the 8th of May 2013. 3 years post Sir Alex Ferguson, the club was in peril. So, the powers that be looked at the situation and decided they only had one option. The nuclear option. If you were to quiz the average football fan, you'll find that José Mourinho, stylistically, philosophically, is both the furthest thing from Manchester United in ethos, yet is so similar where it really counts. The man associated with parking buses and commanding grizzled, seasoned warriors, and a club associated with youth and attacking flair, yet where they align is what has always been deemed to be the most important: trophies. And fair play, they came immediately. But the real question is, at what cost?
Do you know where are many of United players that left the club last season? See where they play, how they play, if they play.
We've looked at the Moyes era, we've looked at the Van Gaal era, but today is special. Today we investigate José Mourinho's Manchester United, an inevitable collapse. 2016 was a very big year. Not only was it a timeline-altering year, RIP my boy, but Manchester United were in a pickle. Louis van Gaal had been given a shot at turning the tide for the club, but unfortunately, it was deemed that he couldn't take them where they wanted to be. 5th place in the league, the second lowest points tally in Premier League history for the team, and a style of play that left even the most optimistic die-hard fans falling asleep. The unfortunate bit is that Van Gaal gave Manchester United their first trophy in the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era, a rare FA Cup, the first the club had won since 2004. Big success. 2 days later, sacked. Tough. No Champions League was of course a big factor in this, and this is what a lot of people will point towards as the deciding factor, but I for one do not buy this. In reality, it's hard to shrug off the feeling that this sacking happened so swiftly for one reason, and one reason alone. José Mourinho was available. After a second stint at Chelsea that produced success, his infamous 3-season cycle came in hot and heavy. Season 1, familiarize yourself with the team. Season 2, win. Season 3, crash and burn. He fell out with players. He believed, probably correctly, that the ones who controlled the media narrative were against him.
Lots of people in TV, but no one is a Chelsea man. Carragher, Liverpool. Neville, Man United. When I retired, on 75 years old, I go to be a pundit and to defend Chelsea on television.
There was the infamous Eva Carneiro incident. The former Chelsea team doctor ran on the pitch to treat Eden Hazard and stopped play at a crucial moment in a match for Swansea. She was then dropped from first-team duties. The situation painted Mourinho as a bully in the workplace, with the fallout leading to many legal problems and what is believed to be an expensive settlement. He was gone by December 2015. Here's the kicker. Multiple sources claim that Manchester United and Mourinho's representatives had already agreed to a pre-contractual deal as early as March 2016, so they had likely been negotiating since long before that. The season only culminated 2 months later, and United finished level on points with Man City, only just missing out on Champions League, meaning that could not have been a factor so early on. But this entire situation was not surprising to some. It was rumored that Mourinho was one of Ferguson's top choices to replace him 4 years prior. That's right, 4 years, as in 2012. Again, it's been rumored that Ferguson wanted to retire after the 11-12 year, but after witnessing City win the league on the final day, he decided to backtrack and stay on one last year. Sid Lowe, a well-known British journalist that specializes in La Liga correspondence, often Real Madrid correspondence, once claimed that Mourinho was after the Manchester United job in 2012, but never got it because
I'm not leaving.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
So he stayed in Madrid. Again, some of these are unconfirmed rumors, but they do track in my headcanon. We do know for certain that a year later, when Ferguson actually retired, has confirmed in his book, Leading, that Mourinho and Guardiola were at the top of his list in 2013, but both had already agreed deals with Chelsea and Bayern Munich, respectively. Well, if we flip the pages and skip over a couple of chapters, we then notice that life is a funny old thing, isn't it? Because clearly, the universe had a plan. By 2016, all roads led to Manchester for both of these managers. But pertaining to Manchester United and Mourinho specifically, I really meant it when I said that these two seem to always have been set on a collision course. And so, on a summer morning in 2016, a new era dawned at Old Trafford. Despite the winding road that it took to get there, the new coach was confident that all had worked out for the best.
I think comes in the right moment of my career, because Man United is one of these clubs, what I used to call a giant club.
He also gave the faithful reassurance of the future.
I want to win. And more than that, I need the supporters and the players to feel that I say that, but I think we can really.
The belief in that statement was strong when we all saw who came through the door. United brought back prodigal son Paul Pogba for a world record £89 million fee. Pogba at 23 embodied a lot of things. Flair, swagger, the dabbing, the dancing, he was brimming with talent. He of course left the club 4 years prior for the low price of free. Became a top 4 central midfielder in the world, only to be brought back in what I personally describe as the most expensive loan deal of all time. Alongside him arrived the enigmatic, charismatic, boisterous 34-year-old Zlatan Ibrahimovic on a free, a man of the exact mold Mourinho was after. Of course, it helped that Zlatan was once a Mourinho player almost a decade prior at Inter Milan. The signing was interesting for a few reasons, but one of them that many fans and media outlets picked up on was that the confidence and justified ego of Zlatan somewhat resembled that of another enigmatic Manchester United legend, Eric Cantona. Cantona saw the resemblance himself and let his thoughts be known.
There can only be one king in Manchester. You can be the prince if you want to.
Zlatan responded in a way that only he can. In an interview with Swedish newspaper Aftonbladet, the man countered. I heard what Cantona said and I congratulate him because I have always admired him. But he should know that I am not going to be the king in Manchester. I'm going to be the god in Manchester. Fair enough, mate. Mourinho also added 27-year-old Armenian playmaker Henrik Mkhitaryan from Borussia Dortmund for £30 million, an extremely intelligent attacking midfielder with a soft touch and a work rate to boot. Zlatan came from France. Mkhitaryan came from Germany. Both were named as the player of the year in their respective leagues the previous year. To round it all up, promising Ivorian centre-back Eric Bailly also joined the fray. He added a dash of craziness, that's for sure. They joined a team that was believed to be full of promise and talent, but just needed something or someone to draw it out. Wayne Rooney was only 30 years old, by the way. Juan Mata was still around. Young Anthony Martial, Marcus Rashford, Memphis Depay, David De Gea was approaching his peak. There was a lot to work with here, which you would hope, considering that in the 3 years post-Ferguson, about £400 million was spent on players. But of course, there was a catch. There would always have been a catch. In a typical José Mourinho side, there is a sense of togetherness you can gather from the players, a sense of us versus them, a siege mentality. It's mentally taxing, it's physically demanding, but when it works, it really works. Promising group or not, would he be able to do it again? Mourinho's reign officially kicked off with the 2016 Community Shield, a win over Leicester City. Days later, United won 3-1 at Bournemouth in his league debut. For the first time in a long time, fans felt a buzz of genuine optimism. Now, Mourinho's tactics had remained mostly unchanged since swapping over 2 red colours. Pragmatic, results first, built on defensive structure, transitional attacks, and exploiting moments rather than sustained high pressing. Typically a mid to low block, narrow shape to push opposition onto the wings, disciplined tracking back from the wingers, a big, reliable focal point up top, which was Zlatan Ibrahimovic, used for hold-up plays, set pieces, and finishing. The default formation was a 4-2-3-1, shifting to a 4-3-3 in big games to add midfield solidity, with Paul Pogba given license to drive forward and under Herrera often deployed as a man marker. Nowhere was this more evident than in a match versus Chelsea, where Herrera became Eden Hazard's shadow for a whole 90 minutes. Herrera got himself a goal and an assist in this game, quite possibly his best performance in a United shirt. From a wider perspective, Mourinho's early United showed promise, but soon came the stumbles. Losses in the league and Europe back to back to back. Vultures in the press began to circle, and so Mourinho, in vintage style I might add, hit back at these so-called quote-unquote football Einsteins that knew more about the game than he does.
The Einsteins, they need money to live, they can't coach, they can't sit on the bench, they can't win matches, they can speak, they can write, they can criticize the work of other people. But I am a good man, I'm a man of goodwill, I do lots of charity, I help so many people, so why not to feed also the Einsteins?
Behind the bravado lay a pretty accurate understanding of United's situation though. With his former club flying under Conte, Spurs in a golden age, Liverpool really building something, Manchester City ascending under Pep Guardiola, Arsenal being ever present at the top, Mourinho's margin for error was razor thin. So it helped that by the end of the year, there was a sense that United were slowly finding their feet under the Portuguese. One such moment that gave people this impression was a symbolic match on the 31st of December 2016, Middlesbrough at Old Trafford. United were 1-0 down late, facing a demoralizing defeat. What made this worse was that Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored a goal that was later disallowed, a goal that shouldn't be possible for most people, let alone a man in his mid-30s. In the Premier League, some incredible acrobatics were on display, but this effort was deemed to be a high boot infringement, even though Ibrahimovic lowered his boot after shooting and was actually the one that was fouled himself. And then came the flash. 2 goals in the final minutes, a combination between Ibrahimovic and Anthony Martial for the first goal. Symbolic, as Martial had to give up his number 9 for Zlatan when he arrived at the club. Whatever underlying bad blood there was seemed to have been forgotten in the moment. The comeback was complete with a Paul Pogba header. By the turn of the year, United were unbeaten in 25 games between October and April, although it is worth noting that this included 12 draws. Nonetheless, it turned out to be a glorious period. Wayne Rooney scored his 250th goal for Manchester United, becoming the outright top scorer in the club's history, eclipsing Sir Bobby Charlton. Statistically, United's league campaign was underwhelming. 6th place with 69 points, only 54 goals scored. Still, many supporters were willing to accept these teething problems in exchange for trophies and Champions League. Mourinho got both. February 2017, League Cup final at Wembley. United edged Southampton 3-2 as Zlatan Ibrahimovic scores twice, including a dramatic 87th minute winner. After that League Cup win, we were given a scene between Paul Pogba and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and the vibes on display, the atmosphere, it was palpable.
That's why you bought him. He's here. That's why he came here. That's why he came here.
Paul Pogba slowly grew into his role, yet to hit the heights he had shown at Juventus, but doing more than enough to maintain the hype. Incredible goals, incredible skills. He took charge and stamped his mark on many matches. He did win few fans over at Sky Sports thanks to his flamboyant persona, but the masses weren't taking those criticisms to heart just yet, and that's because he saved one of his best performances for the Europa League final. United faced Ajax with the Champions League spot on the line. Pogba scored the opening goal, Mkhitaryan with the second, the club's first ever Europa League. All 3 of the bigger rivals contributed to what is the most successful year post-Ferguson for this club to date. And really, that is not bad for a Mourinho first year that is usually supposed to be purely transitional. Fans were left in a delirious state, envisioning what the mythical second season had in store. And, before you laugh, because none of us have the privilege of hindsight, could you blame them? Long story short, in the second season, Mourinho finished second with no silverware, some 19 points behind a rampant, record-breaking centurion Manchester City. Not quite the glorious return the fans had hoped for. Still, it was the highest that the club had climbed in 4 years. However, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and skip forward in time. As the years ticked following the Mourinho era after he had already left the club, Mourinho said something that, at the surface, sounds quite peculiar. He said something that remains one of the most quoted remarks in recent football history about Manchester United.
I consider one of the best jobs of my career to finish second with Manchester United in the Premier League.
Like I said, he said this well after his time with the club, and by that point, so many people that had been watching United over the years had some kind of an idea of what he was referring to. Since he made this comment, lots of memes have been made, lots of jokes have been laughed at. A 2-time Champions League winner, 2-time treble winner, saying second in a league that he had already won 3 times was one of his greatest achievements. But he was right. And realistically, this sentiment probably extends to his first season too. We'll elaborate on it a little bit more as we go along, but consider that he was a new manager coming into a club, bringing players that fit his vision and style, hoping that they gel with a hodgepodge of players that are an amalgamation of the visions of 3 previous managers, yet he still managed to win trophies. Trophies that papered over the cracks of a poor league year. So, on to season 2. Hot property Belgian striker Romelu Lukaku arrived for £75 million from Everton. The former Chelsea man was the subject of a bidding war between his old club and United, but it seemed that he preferred Old Trafford to meet up with his old friend Paul Pogba, who he had just spent the previous 2 summer holidays with in Miami and Los Angeles. With Nemanja Matic added in the midfield to protect the back line and Victor Lindelof as a new defensive option, Mourinho felt he finally had a squad in his image, powerful, experienced, and efficient. And indeed, by October 2017, United were neck and neck with City at the top of the table. But something didn't feel right. In the post-Ferguson era, United were arguably stronger than ever on paper, but were struggling against everyone. Points were coming in as wins and draws accumulated, but the team was so frustratingly slow to each ball. Deep defense was common. Mourinho strongly believed, evidently, that United's defense was too subpar to allow them to operate without the entire team in attendance for every defensive operation. They looked into, but ultimately failed to sign Virgil van Dijk and Michael Keane, as Mourinho clearly felt that his current central defensive outfit was not good enough. The same went for the right-back position, where instead of signing specialists, United opted to continue the use of Ashley Young and Antonio Valencia, both wingers. On the left, they had Luke Shaw, a brilliant player who was a brilliant teenager, but also a player who in 11 years at the time of recording this episode has never had a single season at Old Trafford without an injury setback. In fact, he has only played more than 20 games in all competitions for the club 5 times. Instead of going into the market for positions that were high priority, United decided to sign Alexis Sanchez from Arsenal in a swap deal with Henrik Mkhitaryan. At the time, this was celebrated as a major win and a bit of a mugging off of Arsenal. Sanchez was once their best player by a wide stretch, but had dropped off significantly in his most recent year. So much so that Arsenal were willing to release him, while United were of the opinion that they could reignite the flame. I guess Arsenal felt they could do the same with Mkhitaryan, who had never truly found his feet at Old Trafford. As a side note, the Sanchez unveiling was probably the last big signing I can think of that was truly iconic in how it was rolled out. The promotion video of him playing the piano, the cinematic close shots, it was beautiful. Now, all we get is endless tweets about a player only wanting a certain club for weeks, capped off with a "here we go." There's no showmanship anymore, and it's sad. Rant over. Alexis Sanchez arrived at Old Trafford, attended one training session, and promptly asked his agent if he could return to Arsenal. By his own admission, and I was surprised because I looked up this video on Instagram and it's still up, at least at the time of recording this, he goes into detail about how there was just something wrong going on in the back end for United. There was no unity or cohesion. The scapegoating culture was rife. He was made to feel like he was personally responsible for all of their mishaps. Of course, Sanchez didn't bathe himself in glory. His performances were subpar. But all of this combined, it shouldn't be surprising that he played 45 games for United, scored 5, and left as fast as he could. As you can see, there were a lot of problems. Jesse Lingard turning the Emirates into his personal dance floor was not one of those problems though. Look at him go. One of the most memorable moments of the season came at the Etihad in April. A win from City would have secured the title, and nothing would have made it sweeter than doing so against Manchester United. City went up by 2 before half-time, and as soon as that happened, something clicked. In a second-half performance that truly defies reality, United fought back to end the game 3-2. Paul Pogba was the man of the day with 2 goals. Chris Smalling rounded it all off. And at the end of the day, this was the problem with this era at Manchester United. Even that moment was extremely short-lived. City won the league the very next week, and it was believed that Pogba had heavily fallen out of favor with Mourinho, dating back to early on in his United career. This was reportedly due to his lackluster work rate and attitude, a theory bolstered by the fact that Mourinho typically chose to field 21-year-old Scott McTominay instead of Pogba on many an occasion, beginning in early 2018. McTominay, if nothing else, is and was revered for his running talent and discipline at United, and Mourinho took every opportunity to sing his praise. At the crux of this issue, Pogba's preferred role was as a free-roaming left-sided midfielder in a 3, but Mourinho often used him as a pivot in a 4-2-3-1, which required more defensive discipline. But let's move along with the story because we certainly will be talking about these two again in the near future. Overall, it really was a strange season. Statistically, United had the second best defense in the league. 28 goals conceded, only 1 more than City, and David De Gea won the Golden Glove. However, the team scored 68 goals, 38 less than City. The Champions League produced no joy either, knocked out by a Sevilla side that finished 7th in La Liga that season. All of this triggered the infamous football heritage speech, where Mourinho went on to essentially state that United were bad in the Champions League when he came, so you shouldn't expect the team he inherited to be good immediately upon his arrival.
2013, out in the last 16. I was in the other bench. 2014, out in the quarterfinal. 2015, no European football. 2016, out in the group phase. 2017, win Europa League with me.
In theory, all of this sounds reasonable on the surface, but not when you consider that he'd been at the club for over 18 months and United spent £300 million on recruits in that time frame. To defend himself and his project, he argued that these players needed more time to become the best and that they were investments for the future, even beyond his time as manager. He elaborates on this idea and goes on to compare this with how Man City's star-studded Centurion team had been at the club for many years by the point that Guardiola arrived.
Otamendi, Kevin De Bruyne, Fernandinho, Silva, Sterling, Aguero, they are investments from the past, not from the last 2 years.
Irony here is that most of those players he mentioned at Man City won the league with them within about 2 years of joining the club. This speech lasted about 12 minutes, and Mourinho was adamant to not let any reporters get a word in.
Those stats
Are real.
They are real.
They are real. Do you want other real?
No.
I'll give you a couple more real.
This was classic Mourinho, though. He knew what he was doing. He was shifting the goalposts, turning your attention to him instead of the other issues at hand. And look at me, almost a decade later, highlighting it. He's good at what he does, and there would be no papering over the cracks as a loss in the FA Cup final to Antonio Conte's Chelsea left Mourinho in no man's land. A win would have shifted the narrative completely. Instead, we entered the third year of the 3-year cycle, and the club was nowhere near being on track. Over the summer, cracks turned into chasms. Mourinho had made clear his transfer wishes, a new centre-back, Harry Maguire. He didn't get it. The United board, probably unconvinced by some of Mourinho's past buys, understandably so, they spent a lot of money, refused to sanction it. The transfer window closed with United adding midfielder Fred, teenage fullback Diogo Dalot, and 35-year-old keeper Lee Grant. In the preseason in America, it seemed that every question the manager was fielded was aimed at getting some sort of soundbite out of him to the tune of him not being happy with his current squad, to which he responded, "I have my players, and I like my players. One lie repeated 1,000 times is still a lie. When you repeat 1,000 times that my relationship with my players is not good, it's a lie." United won their opener with Leicester, but it was clear that something had shifted in the atmosphere. In what seemed like a moment of reconciliation, Pogba was surprisingly named as an official vice-captain and given the captain's armband in the absence of regular captain Antonio Valencia at the start of the year. He had captained the team sporadically the previous year, but this felt a bit different. Pogba was now a world champion after playing a star role in France's World Cup triumph. He went off on international duty and played a remarkable tournament. With players like Kante, Matuidi, even Griezmann around him, he was able to express himself and contribute to the best of his abilities, rounding off with a goal in the final. In this tournament, I would heavily argue that Pogba produced the finest football he ever has in his entire professional career. He was simply electric. Off the pitch, a video of him leading the dressing room speeches emerged and went viral, proving that he was not only immaculate on the pitch, but a motivating and decisive voice off of it. Well, back in Manchester, it took literally 1 month for Pogba to publicly be stripped of his vice-captaincy. And if you follow the sequence of events, it's not hard to see that all was not well. First, he stated to the press in August that, quote, "There are things that I cannot say, otherwise I will get fined." Then, in September, he openly called out Mourinho's tactics after a 1-1 home draw to Wolves. Quote, "We are at home and we should play much better against Wolves. We are here to attack." No arguments here, big man. 3 days later, a training ground confrontation between Mourinho and Pogba was caught on camera. Now this made big news all around the world. It was reportedly over an Instagram post that Pogba made after a League Cup match against Derby County, a match that was lost on penalties. It showed Pogba, Shaw and Pereira, who weren't playing, in a jovial mood. Mourinho believed they were mocking the club. Pogba stated it was recorded while United were winning, but only uploaded after due to poor Wi-Fi. Old Trafford does notoriously have poor Wi-Fi, so this could be plausible. However, does any of that matter? This relationship was clearly in the mud. Mourinho's third season meltdown was materializing. Defense was shaky. Players were being accused of lacking professionalism. The media coverage was relentless. Every Mourinho press conference became its own highly anticipated show. The most unhinged one came after a 3-0 home defeat to Tottenham Hotspur on only the third match day of the year. In classic fashion, he put all the focus on himself. The scoreline was 3-0. Our guy made sure that we did not misinterpret what that meant.
Do you know what this means? 3-0. But also mean 3 premierships, and I won more premierships alone than the other 19 managers together.
He then requested some basic courtesy from the audience.
Respect. Respect, man. Respect.
It took 3 match days for villain Mourinho to come out. It was at this moment that I personally knew that we were cooked. By October, United were closer to the relegation zone than the top. At Old Trafford, atmospheres grew toxic. It wasn't just Pogba that was having a bad time. The defensive style of Mourinho was leaving Romelu Lukaku out to dry. He was all alone up top. Rashford and Martial never found consistency either. As is usually the case with the Mourinho side, he always has a sect of extremely loyal players that he continually bats for. Marwan Fellaini, Nemanja Matic, Antonio Valencia, Scott McTominay were some, but they were not enough. By December 2018, the club was lifeless. Liverpool were building an empire under Klopp and gave him a 3-1 battering at Anfield. The stat line was damning. United faced 36 shots, the most they had ever allowed in a Premier League game to that point, and Mourinho's final press interview at the time was as limp as his team. Quote, "We can still finish 4th." End quote. Even he knew that whether or not that was true, he would not be there to witness it. 2 days later, on December 18, 2018, Mourinho was sacked. The day Mourinho was fired, Pogba posted this on Instagram, then quickly deleted it. Apparently it was part of a Adidas promotion, but I don't know, man. I'm sensing a pattern here. In the immediate aftermath of Mourinho's sacking, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took over as caretaker manager. First game out, United trashed Cardiff 5-1. Pogba recorded 4 goals and 3 assists in Ole's first 3 league games, and he was not alone. The entire team was looking noticeably better, which was either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you ask. Good stuff because the club got rid of a toxic manager, bad stuff because this was proof that the players threw him under the bus. Fan forums filled with "I told you so's" from the anti-Mourinho group. In the years since, however, those same people are likely singing a different tune. Remember this?
I consider one of the best jobs of my career to finish second with Manchester United in the Premier League.
Taking a look at the team that Mourinho had at the time, hindsight will tell you that he was correct. The club had and continues to have so many problems. Several of the players that he managed have simply not turned out the way they were supposed to. In 6 years, Pogba never achieved much at United outside of his first season with the club and, coincidentally, the year Mourinho left, or rather, the 6 months after Mourinho left. Martial, Lingard, Sanchez, Lukaku, Rashford, Mkhitaryan, none of them reached where they should have as a United player consistently or at all. Of those that achieved anything close to their potential, they had to leave to do so, but were probably part of the problem in some way while at the club. For Mourinho himself, the United chapter was not a hit. 144 games, 84 wins, 32 draws, 28 defeats, a 58.3% win rate. Far below the lofty standards he set at Chelsea or Real Madrid or Inter or Porto. He did win, which is testament to his overall power as a coach. Quote, "In 16 years, 14 times I qualify for Champions League and twice I win the Europa. Just a little curiosity for my lovers of stats." He's not wrong, but it's no secret that he was part of the problem too. At the start of the video, I mentioned that Mourinho works best with hardened, focused, old-school characters. People that don't really belong to the social media age, an age of players that really came to a close and fizzled out around the mid-2010s, which really does coincide with the period in which the man began to lose his powers. Again, looking back and believing the decisions made by everyone involved were short-sighted is easy in hindsight, but it's hard to argue with that notion. Nonetheless, Mourinho did leave his mark on the club. It was controversial at times, but I don't think anyone can deny that he overachieved with what he was given. Truly, he gave us nights to remember and headaches to forget. That was Mourinho at United.